Sorry about that.
So Maria, I'm just kind of going through some of the polls that we have to put down here.
Perfect. Did you go through the questions already?
So I was just going through the first one, so I was just looking through the second one.
Yeah, so the second one is really interesting. What questions do you find you struggle with during an interview? Usually everybody's really nervous when they go for an interview and they expect this really difficult question is going to pop up. And the more you go to interviews, the better you get at it. But I see here one of the most difficult questions seems to be providing direct examples from your past experience. So this is really interesting. We're going to discuss that in the webinar on how to best prepare. But it's always good to think of some examples before you go to the interview, so then you're not caught off guard trying to think of something right away.
So everyone, just so you're aware as well, if there is a connection issue or you get kicked out, you could try logging back in. But the webinar is being recorded and it will be sent to you as well. So you will have, you'll be able to reflect back on it as well.
Yeah. And
well, look at the third poll. Interesting, Maria. Look, are you finding it challenging having virtual interviews rather than in-person interviews? So it looks like 61% is they're enjoying the opportunity for a virtual call instead. I guess I could appreciate that a little bit too. I mean, being in the pandemic that we're in, it's becoming the new normal. So I'm glad that people are actually enjoying that.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting because from my experience with candidates, they are a bit nervous going for a virtual call because you never know how your connection will be and whether the other side will be able to see you well. So that's really good that everybody feels comfortable with these. And then I also see a lot of people are doing well with LinkedIn. They're updating it regularly, 66.67% updated when they're actively sourcing. So that's quite good. I see only 8% don't remember their password. so that's good, actually.
You guys gave us all the right answers in that run, right, Maria?
I'm thinking when I get kicked out of LinkedIn, because I use it every day, I actually don't remember my own password. So I keep trying to log in. So it's good that all these people will feel so comfortable with their passwords. Usually a tricky topic. But yeah.
So hi, everybody. I'm seeing a lot of highs and welcome. Okay, we're going to get started with the webinar. So I'm going to start off by welcoming you all to come onto the webinar today. We are excited to hold a webinar to discuss how to sell yourself as a candidate in the post-pandemic job market. As you may imagine yourself, a lot of things have changed in the job market recently due to the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we are going to discuss what those changes are. How have the employer's expectations changed and what you can do to stand out as a candidate and be competitive in the market?
So before we continue, we want to also take the time to introduce ourselves. So Lisa Ocello, my colleague, is a senior recruitment consultant for the Toronto team, and I'm also a senior recruitment consultant for the Vancouver team. Forge Recruitment is a boutique recruitment agency. We offer staffing and recruitment services for legal and accounting and finance positions. And we work with candidates and employers in both Vancouver and Toronto. So the first topic we would like to start with is how the Toronto and Vancouver markets have changed recently and what the current job market trends are.
For sure. So what we're noticing is that the mid-sized to larger firms in Toronto are currently functioning in skeleton offices. The firms that are focusing more on recruitment right now are the smaller boutique style firms. The main area of law that has multiple vacancies is now real estate, especially commercial real estate. Other areas are also starting to pick up. We're also noticing that a lot of in-house roles are opening, and a lot of the bigger companies with larger legal teams are now interested in moving forward with recruitment. The courts in Toronto are still closed, so litigation roles are not as common at this time. Firms are becoming more selective and are looking for more senior candidates, so junior roles are not as common either.
In Vancouver, unfortunately, a lot of employees were temporarily or permanently laid off due to the pandemic. Some of the full service national firms were also forced to let go of employees. And actually, the same thing happened with mid sized firms and smaller boutique firms alike. Now, the competition on the job market is greater than before, as there are a lot of candidates looking for roles. Most of them are very qualified, and there are, of course, not as many roles available for them to take. So, just like in Toronto, Vancouver employers are becoming more selective. Right now, what we're noticing is that larger firms are still closed or operating on a rotation schedule, but will not be hiring until late August or early September. Actually, the first step they'll go through with would be calling back some of the employees they had to temporarily let go of. And that's when they'll move on with recruitment. Mid-sized and boutique style firms, however, are continuing with recruitment, and there's a lot of in-house roles available now as well. There are a lot more intermediate senior roles on the job market than junior roles, as firms are expecting that the candidates are more independent and able to start in their role right away with minimal training or supervision.
Sounds good. So we've got a question here that we could kind of answer in between, but do you see more remote work opportunities with Vancouver and Toronto clients? So from other Canadian cities. So as far as for the Toronto, and I'm sure it's the same with Vancouver, Maria, but there is more remote work in a sense of right now. A lot of firms are allowing their staff to work from home and then moving into the direction of, in office as things start to open up.
Yeah, actually, same thing for Vancouver. A lot of people are still not back in the office, so they prefer that the new employees start working from home, working remotely. They have really good processes to set that up, so it hasn't been difficult at all for most of the firms. What I'm also noticing, though, is that a lot of candidates recently are really excited about working from home. So that's becoming more like the norm. They're really hoping to have this option further down their employment, maybe to have 1 day working from home per week or more options for flexibility like that. So definitely what I think will happen is that employers will become more and more flexible on that topic.
Sounds good. Yeah. So the second point that we want to discuss is, how have employers' expectations changed? So in both Toronto and in Vancouver, there are more openings for senior level candidates. In Toronto, there are more vacancies for law clerks, and in Vancouver, the intermediate senior roles prevail. Still in Vancouver, there are still some junior roles available. What has changed is the employer's approach to recruitment. Employers are becoming more particular about software requirements. They are no longer as flexible as before to offer training for new employees on the software the firm is using. Recently, having 2+ years of experience was enough to get an intermediate role. Now, firms are looking for more experienced candidates with 8+ years in Toronto and 3 to 5+ years in Vancouver. Firms are becoming more mindful of how they are spending their budgets, so they prefer to invest in employees who will be independent and can manage a high workload.
And they're also looking for a personality fit. So a person who is adaptable and able to start right away without a lot of training. The ideal candidate is one who's independent, can take responsibility for tasks alone. Somebody also who is very tech savvy. Software is definitely becoming more and more important for the selection process. So somebody with a strong technical background. Firms also expect candidates to be mature and to be able to explain in detail their past responsibilities. So going back to some of our poll questions where we saw that people feel uncomfortable giving a lot of examples from their past work experience during an interview, this is definitely something critical because you want to stand out in that way. So giving multiple examples from your past experience on how your job responsibilities match the job description of the role you're going for is really critical at this time. So also another topic that employers are interested in, even though a lot of candidates have been let go from their firms due to COVID-19, is actually why you were let go. And also, what's your motivation for going for a new role? So it doesn't sound very strong if you say, oh, I was let go from my firm and now I'm looking for a new role. You really have to think about why this firm is special, why this role is interesting to you, and what is your motivation to go for it. So more than ever, firms expect that candidates have done extensive research on their website and also the backgrounds of the lawyers that work in the firm. Another topic that's really interesting recently that I'm noticing on the market is that it's difficult to make a switch from one area of law to another due to the competition for each area of law. There's a lot of qualified candidates that have multiple years of experience in their field. So that's why now is maybe not the best time to make the switch. Maybe it's better to really go for the skills that you have so that you can shine as a candidate. Another trend that we're also seeing is that the recruitment process is more complex than before. So employers are becoming more selective about who they want to invite for an interview. They also take a longer time to interview multiple candidates before making a final decision. The average number of interviews, just from our recent experience, before an employer makes an offer, is about two. So most interviews are now held over Zoom. For Toronto, what we're noticing is that the first interview is usually either a phone interview or a Zoom call, and then the second interview is either a Zoom call or an in-person interview. And it's very similar for Vancouver as well. Employers are actually very comfortable using Zoom. So that's why candidates need to become really comfortable using it as well.
So the third topic we want to discuss is how to sell yourself as a candidate. So here are some tips that we can provide you with on how to sell yourself. Number one, make sure your resume includes enough details on your tasks, responsibilities in each position, and lists numerical data about your workload. Your resume is the first thing that the employers see, and it should give them enough information about your experience and also your background. It should also showcase your strengths and give firm details on your personal skills as well. The attitude you have towards presenting yourself well in the resume is the attitude you will have on the job, or at least that's how the firms think. Make sure that you include a lot of numerical information regarding your experience, speaking to the volume of work you were handling, and also the size of your team and the amount of files you are handling. That gives direct data to firms on what your responsibilities and tasks were in your past experience. In order to make your resume stand out, think of tailoring it directly to the job description. Once you review the job description in detail, you need to underline the keywords in the duties, responsibilities sections and try to highlight those also into your resume. That way, when an employer is looking through your experience, these actual keywords will stand out and will make you look much stronger as a candidate. It's also essential that you include your achievements in each work experience you mention in your resume, because that will show the employer what your successes are and how you have used your skills and experience to shine in your past roles. Finally, never forget to include a section on your software skills. Recently, the software experience is becoming more and more essential for qualifying candidates, and employers use your resume to determine how quickly you will adapt to the technical requirements of the role. So don't forget to mention all and every single software that you've used before and your level as well as of knowledge and experience in them.
So I actually want to follow up on this topic because it's really important, since in the end, your resume is kind of like the ticket to getting an interview. So it's a very critical part of your application process. So what I would say is also to try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. So imagine you're a lawyer whose schedule is all booked and you have absolutely no time to spare, and you have to go through all these resumes to choose who you want to speak with. So obviously, if you immediately see some keywords that stand out that are directly related to the job description you already posted, and you see the softwares you're looking for, and you see the education, you immediately want to go through with this person and invite them for an interview. So that's why I really try to adapt your resume as much as possible to the actual job description, so that you can immediately stand out as a candidate and then get the chance to showcase yourself during during the interview. So another topic also to focus on when you're preparing your application process is to make sure that you have the right experience required when applying for a particular role. Um, Now employers are becoming more selective, so if you don't have a very similar experience to what they're looking for, they might actually not continue further with you in the recruitment process. So we're finding that firms are becoming more selective on software and also on specific job experience. So that's why over the course of the pandemic, firms have also shifted their approach in requiring a candidate who is already really experienced and doesn't need a lot of training or any kind of developing during this time. That also includes software training. Recently, we've actually had numerous examples of firms who are interviewing multiple candidates for weeks without being able to make a decision on who to hire. We even had examples of firms just rejecting a candidate based on software experience alone. So as you see, this is essential to really do your homework prior to applying and check whether you match the requirements of the firm. And if you do, just really show it. Show what software experience you have. Show the highlights of your past work experience and how that matches the job description prepared by the firm. And show the firm that you are the right candidate in terms of initial qualifications so that then you can really show your soft skills during the interview.
Sounds good. Yeah. So Maria, I'm just going to kind of look over to the chat. We got some questions coming in. So we have a question here. Do you see any jobs for senior finance professionals in law firms? So, I mean, as far as for the senior finance professionals and law firms, the jobs themselves right now are really catered to the senior legal assistant and law clerk roles. We are seeing some lawyer roles open up as well. Again, things are starting to move. It's just, it's taking some time. So Maria, do you want to elaborate that on Vancouver?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's very similar in Vancouver. But what we're seeing also that's really positive is that the markets are picking up. So there's a lot more opportunities than before in the past 2 months. So I'm definitely optimistic that firms are getting back to normal. So things will also fall into place really quickly.
Sounds good. So just one more. We'll answer this one too, Maria. This is I'm moving to Vancouver by October on an open work permit. Is it a good option? Is moving to Vancouver by October on an open work permit, is it a good option? Sorry, that's the question.
That's actually a really, really good question, because what I foresee will happen in Vancouver is that in September and October, the markets will move a lot faster. There will be a lot of roles available just because it's right after the summer. So I would say that's then an ideal time to look for a position, especially if you're an entry-level candidate looking for an initial role. There might be a lot more junior roles available in October rather than now, because now, as we already mentioned in the webinar, now there's a lot more intermediate and senior roles just because firms are looking for more experienced candidates. So I would say the fall is usually the ideal time to look for an opportunity to enter the legal field.
Sounds good. So we got a comment. Yes, even I have been through multiple interviews and companies taking their time over 6 to 8 weeks to make a decision. So absolutely, you are like most of other candidates at this time. Like we had mentioned in the beginning, firms are now just starting to kind of get their feet wet and getting back into the firms. And we still have skeleton offices and that are working within, they're not, we have to have some staff that are still working within the in-home offices. So the process is taking a little bit longer, and we just need to be patient, but we're hopeful that things will start moving in the right direction. So going into the third one here, make sure you keep your LinkedIn up to date. So recently, a lot of employers check your LinkedIn profile when reviewing your resume. It is essential that you keep it up to date, because employers may be confused if the experience you have in your resume does not match the experience on LinkedIn. Be mindful of dates and years specifically, as that's what employers check usually. I have recently had a case where a client was initially interested in a candidate, but once they checked their LinkedIn profile, ended up rejecting them as the profile work experience did not match the resume one. Make sure to avoid the situations like that by simply just keeping your profile up to date. So that goes back to our poll question that we had, and why it's important that you guys remember your passwords. So just keeping that LinkedIn up to date is crucial, especially at this time.
Yeah, and another thing also, we already discussed this a bit, is to prepare well on the firm and the lawyer's background before you go in for an interview. So imagine a really qualified candidate going for an interview who is very experienced, the perfect fit for the role, but not so motivated for it. Then going up against a person who may not have the perfect experience, but is super, super prepared, knows about the history of the firm, and is highly motivated for the role. So who do you think would likely be more successful in the end? Likely the second candidate. So going in well prepared for an interview is critical, especially at this time when there's so many candidates going in for roles. So be sure to do your homework prior to the interview. First thing you can do is you can check the website, review more information about the firm, what they do, what areas of law they focus on, and also how many partners they have. So you will get an idea of the culture, how big is the firm? Is it a small boutique firm, or is it a mid-sized or large firm? You can then continue further with researching more about the lawyers, especially the lawyer that you will be speaking with during the interview, because you can read a lot about his or her background and then be prepared when you expect questions on the interview. Looking into the history of the firm, or also reading client reviews online, are all great ways to stand out as a candidate. You can always take the time to mention during the interview details on the history of the firm, or any specific positive comments you read about the firm online that made you excited to apply to join the team. This always makes the firm feel special. And it also underlines your motivation for applying to that specific job. So it always shows that you're likely a good cultural fit for the firm because you are so motivated for the role. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. And another thing you can do, which is very critical, is to really reach out into your network. So if you know someone who is working at the firm or has worked there before, reach out to them and ask them, how is their experience? What's the firm like? What's the culture like? That way you can find out a lot about the company, and you can also prepare really well for the interview because you know what the firm is looking for, what personalities fit there the best, and what kind of environment it is, what's the work-life balance like. So definitely always take advantage of that. Reaching out into your network is always a really good way to get to know the firm as well.
Sounds good. So we got another question here. The employers are more interested in candidates with experience in Canada, or are they also accepting employees with foreign experience in the law? So to answer that question, with Toronto, the work experience in Canada is important. In the regular market, they are looking for 2+ years of work experience in that particular area of practice. However, going back to, where we are right now in the pandemic, they are looking for more senior in that particular area of practice. Maria, is it the same in Vancouver?
Yeah, Lisa, I have to say it is, especially now because there's a lot of candidates going for roles that are very, very qualified, have multiple years of experience. So it's a bit trickier if you have a lot of foreign experience to apply directly. That's why you shouldn't be afraid to start off your legal career, maybe in a lower position, maybe in a more of an entry level role, so you gain a bit of experience already working in the same city, working in that area of law, and then continue to grow from there. It's also important to really learn what kind of education you might need so that you become a competitive candidate, especially for the legal field. Obviously, your legal experience from abroad cannot directly be applied, so you need to take additional courses. In Vancouver, that would usually be the legal administrative certificate or the paralegal certificate, or you can also try to apply to become a lawyer, to make sure that you can go to the exam and then be called to the bar as well. I don't know if it's the same for Toronto, but I assume it's always best if you have already the certification. Like, what would you say, Lisa?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, education is important. Don't get me wrong, but within Toronto, they really focus on the years of experience, work experience, I should say, within that particular area of practice. So the education part, of course, very important, but the actual work experience is crucial.
Yeah.
So we'll go into the next point. So make sure to carefully read the job description and prepare examples for each task that is listed of your past experience in it. So as we have mentioned before, firms are being very selective with their searches. With that being said, they also are making sure you're able to complete the tasks with minimal supervision. So reviewing the job descriptions and understanding your duties and what is expected of you helps you prepare better, as well as give the firm exactly what they are looking for. So be prepared always to discuss 2 to 3 examples on each task to help you sell yourself to the firm as well. Also, using keywords from the job descriptions will also help you to stand out, as the employer will see you fit the requirements of the position directly. So don't forget to mention your software skills during the interview, as those are, as we said before, more and more important. So underline all the softwares you've used and your experience level with each, especially if the firm you are applying for is using the same software.
Yes, absolutely. This is very, very critical at this time to try to stand out as much as possible. So definitely having these keywords in your resume and then following up on those keywords in the interview is really, really important. Another topic that's also important when you go into an interview is actually asking adequate questions about the firm and the role, because they will help you gain a deeper understanding of whether this role in this firm would be a match for you. So when you have an interview, it's for the firm to see if you're a fit for the role. But it's also kind of an interview for them, as you want to see if the role is the right fit for you. So many candidates always go to the interview thinking it's a one-way street, but it's for both sides to interview each other to see if the role and the firm are a fit. So with that being said, it's important you ask or interview the firm with enough of the right questions about the firm and the job itself. So you want to be sure to leave confident and comfortable that if you have an offer from this firm, you have all the information you need to make a decision. So don't be afraid to ask questions, because this is a career move for you. So you want to be sure it's the right one for you. You don't want to get in a situation of accepting a role that you're unhappy with and then after a month or two looking for another position. Nobody wants that. So I've actually had multiple examples of times when a candidate asked the firm about their culture, and this usually seems to be a really good question to ask, because it shows you're really interested not just in the role, but you're also interested in how the team works. So when an employer gets that question, they immediately think that you're a mature candidate, but you're also somebody who's a good team player. And wants to get along well with everyone in their team, wants to have a positive culture. Also, firms kind of love the opportunity to tell you more about what they're proud of, and then how their culture is different than other firms. So you give them also the opportunity to sell themselves to you. So definitely come up with a list of questions before an interview so that you are prepared, and then try to ask all of them as much as you can.
Sounds good. So we have another question here. So we're planning to go to Vancouver in July, as my wife was going to college at Capitano, but due to COVID, our plans were postponed to July 2021. We are even strongly considering canceling our trip due to uncertainty. Based on the profile, do you think it is worth seeking a leadership position, or would I have to seek something technical in IT, a function of which I do not have so much which I do not have so much practical experience?
So that's an interesting question, because I really have to get to know the candidate and the background a bit more. But what I'm noticing now is that in Vancouver, there's more intermediate to senior roles. And I think over time, there will be, again, more junior roles, especially in the fall. So what will end up happening afterwards is that a lot of managerial roles will likely open, because there will be a need for people to manage the teams that were already created, because more and more people will be onboarding. So I would say I actually have a few candidates looking for managerial roles right now, and it's been tough because there aren't many senior level roles like that now. But I would say after the fall and early next year, there will be more and more roles available that will be like that. And talking about IT and a more technical role, actually I've noticed a lot of the managerial roles in Vancouver also have a technical component. So a lot of times you're either supervising a team and trying to get them up to speed on maybe a new system that's implemented, or you may be evaluating the efficiency of the team and how they can become more productive and more efficient. So technical skills for managerial roles are becoming more and more key. So it's definitely essential, if you go for any kind of manager level role, that you're also a very well technically prepared candidate as well. So yeah, it's difficult to answer this question directly. It really depends on the situation. But I would say what I'm expecting is that there will be more and more managerial roles coming up at the end of the year.
Sounds good. So going on to our next point. So evaluate the cultural fit the firm is looking for. Be on the lookout for key points mentioned in the job description, such as attention to detail or a communication skills requirement. So in every job description, the employer suggests what personality would be a good cultural fit for the role. It is important that you take the time to analyze the job description carefully and be on the lookout for any signs from the employer who they are looking for. Sometimes you will see phrases like attention to detail, able to prioritize and multitask, excellent communicator with a positive attitude, just to name a few. All of these examples show that the firm is looking for in order to stand out as a candidate. You need to be prepared with examples on how your personality fits the firm requirements, or how your experience showcases that you are the right person for that particular role.
Yes, and another topic also that's very critical to prepare on is preparing for the Zoom interview. Just because this is becoming the new way of interviewing. So definitely preparing in advance and testing out the equipment and the contact information of the person you'll be speaking with is critical at this time, because you want to be fully prepared before the interview. As we move into our new normal way of virtual interviews, you want to be as prepared as possible. So trying to log into the Zoom meeting prior to the interview and ensuring everything works properly is critical. And what I would say, if you're new to Zoom, what would help you is if you ask maybe a friend or a family member to do a test run with you, just so you can get comfortable with the technology and you know how everything works. You also want to make sure when you log on that you ask the firm if they can see you and hear you properly. Just as I was having some technical issues in the beginning of the presentation today, it's always good to ask because you never know. And technology might not always be on your side, but you can control what you want to. So always treat this also as an in-person interview. So dress up, look really nice. Professional wear is very important because they can still see you. So it's almost like an in-person interview. I've actually had multiple examples so far of candidates going in for a Zoom interview, but then they were struggling with it. So actually the firms ended up using the technical difficulties the candidates were facing as a way to test how they will handle a difficult issue and how they would resolve it. So it was almost like a test for them. So that's why it's best if you just test everything out in advance and you're completely ready and prepared, so you don't end up in an awkward situation, not being able to connect with the firm.
Sounds good. So just going back to the questions here. So I was temporarily laid off due to the pandemic in April. Should I still indicate that employer as my present employer on a resume? So absolutely. I mean, everybody is kind of in this together, and other firms are understanding, due to the situation. So it's very important to be honest, first of all, when you are applying to other roles. And being temporarily laid off due to a pandemic is something that was out of your control. It doesn't really reflect on you as an individual. It reflects based on the market and the firms and how many people they can hold in office due to the situation. So going into our next point, so always have your resume in front of you to consult with on specific questions the firm might ask you about. So very often during the interview, firms will go through your experience listed in the resume and may ask a specific question regarding a phrase you used in it. That's why it's always a great idea to have your resume in front of you to consult with. A lot of the time, you do not review your resume regularly, and you may not remember exactly what the firm is referring to. Preparing with your resume by your side, you also show the firm you are professional and eager to discuss your experience in detail.
Yes, and another thing is also going into the interview with a positive attitude and always staying polite and professional. That's the next point we're going to cover, and it's critical because when you go to an interview, regardless of how interested you are in the firm or the role, you have to always stay positive and professional. Even if the firm is not the right fit for you, or you may find the role uninteresting, it is essential you always leave a good impression, as you never really know long term where your career might take you. There may be times when you go to an interview where the employers are very inquisitive and they ask multiple questions to determine your experience. So you should not take this as a negative thing. You should always take it in a positive way, because it is the firm's way to learn more about you and to evaluate a potential cultural fit as well. So always stay polite and try to answer to the best of your ability by providing clear examples from your experience. Keep in mind that now also a lot of firms are taking longer to get back to the candidates with feedback. So if you're really interested in a firm, what I would suggest is to not hesitate to contact the person you interviewed with directly, and thank them for their time and consideration of your candidacy. Because that way the firm will be really impressed by your motivation and will be more likely to get back to you quickly. I saw a question about cold calling firms. It's very much related to this. You always want to contact the firms to follow up with your motivation for the role. And one of the best ways to contact them, of course, if you have their email, is to email them, but also is via LinkedIn. Just because on LinkedIn, you have the picture, people can relate to you more. It's almost like you have a personal connection with that person. So connecting over LinkedIn and following up this way, I've noticed really, really works. So it's definitely something you can do in addition to just going for the interview.
Sounds good. So, Maria, we actually have a software question here, so maybe both of us can answer this. But it says, what software technical skills are most sought out by firms and in-house roles?
Yes, this is a very good question. Of course, it depends on every role. So it depends on what area of law you're going for. But you definitely have to have very strong Microsoft Office skills. That's a must. And you have to, feel really comfortable editing documents and, doing all kinds of automations like that. But also you have to have a prior software experience with a software in your area of law. So even if it's not the same software as the software of the firm that you're applying to, most softwares I'm noticing are really similar. So if you have experience in one, you will likely pick up on the other one really fast. So I would say now more than ever, software experience is very critical. What would you say, Lisa, for Toronto?
I would actually agree with everything you just said, to be honest. And that's what the job descriptions are for as well. So just, making sure you're reviewing that job description and really paying attention to that software. It's kind of the things that we have been discussing already in this presentation. But just making sure you are comfortable with that software that is listed on the job description. But everything else that you had mentioned, Bria, would be the same for Toronto.
Yeah.
So going to our next point. So in Toronto, there are some candidates that are being picky. Don't reject interviews and stay open-minded to the salaries that are being presented. It's easy to take a few steps back when you get a call for an interview because you heard, say, bad things about the firm, or maybe the drive might be too far, or they won't pay me the salary I want. These are all valid thoughts, but being in the pandemic market, if you are being called for an interview, that means you meet all the criteria that they are looking for. So we suggest that you don't turn it down. Go for the interview. You might actually like the firm or see it differently than others have. That is what an interview is for, to learn about the firm and the staff and position. So go for it. Don't make a decision without having all your facts on hand. Every interview counts right now, and the more options you have, the better. Also, with that said, we are finding that many senior level candidates are being laid off and affected due to the pandemic. So we're finding that the supply of candidates are outweighing the demand of the jobs that are active. So we suggest that you should be more flexible on your salary requirements as well.
Yes, definitely. During this time, it's more critical than ever to be patient with the flow and the process of job hunting stages, and really keep in mind it's a numbers game in the end. You really need to stay positive through it all. So the more you apply to jobs, the more interviews you attend, the more flexible and open-minded you are when you have the interviews, the better chances you have of finding the right match. Definitely, in order to be successful, be aware as much as possible of how the market works and what will make you stand out more and more in this market. So we hope that these tips helped. We will now open the floor to questions.
Sounds good. So, Maria, I'm just kind of going through the some of these here. So, it's the one question here is: can Canada lose its attractiveness for immigrants given the rising unemployment rate and competition for job openings?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because I don't think it's Canada related that much. I would say every country right now is going through kind of a financial crisis in a way. I would say compared to other countries in the world, Canada is one of the best right now, doing the best in this pandemic. So the job market actually is not as affected as we had expected initially. I think it's definitely starting to pick up more and more. But what I'm noticing, just because I have friends in so many other countries, also in Europe specifically, but also in the US, it's a bit trickier getting a job. I would say Canada is actually doing quite well. So just from my personal point of view, I don't think Canada will become less attractive. Actually, on the contrary, you really see a country, in light of a crisis. So the way that a country deals with a crisis and the steps that it takes really shows you how prepared the country is and how well it takes care of the people that live there. So I would say actually the job market in Canada is one of the best right now. So long term, this will be actually a plus for people thinking to immigrate to Canada.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Maria. I feel like the job market itself, like you had mentioned in Canada, is a lot better than in other countries. So yeah, I totally agree with what you said there. So going on to the next one. It says, I do apologize for being late. And if this question was already addressed, please excuse. When do you predict recruitment for junior associates in corporate law will pick up in Vancouver or in Toronto? So thank you, and no need to apologize. We welcome all questions, so thank you. So as far as for Toronto, the junior associates in the corporate law area of practice, I feel like any sort of junior role within the Toronto area, we will start seeing more happen towards, my prediction would be September, October. We're hoping that, the market is going to start picking up and the opportunity will be there around that time.
Yeah, and just to continue a bit with Vancouver, I'm seeing sort of the similar thing. So we had a lot of litigation roles initially, like in the past 2 months, but now we're seeing also more corporate roles open up. So what I would say, just completely the same with what Lisa said, is that starting the fall, there will be a lot more roles on the corporate side. And I also see the market picking up for junior associates. Initially, of course, the lawyer searches were primarily focusing on lawyers with a lot more experience, just because firms where some of them struggling financially, so they wanted somebody to just come in and start billing right away, somebody with a lot of experience. But I think this will shift over time, and in the next few months, we'll see more firms being interested in junior associates in Vancouver.
How do you show to companies that you are ready to transition from a retail store to an office position?
I think I just want to answer this question in this way because it really depends on the role you're going for. It's not so much about the transition. So if you were going for a role that's facing, a lot of people, it's like a front office role rather than a back office role. You can really use your skills so far because you're probably an excellent communicator. You're probably a really good judge of people's character. You know how to have a way with people going through a crisis. You know how to help them, how to assist them. So if you were going for a role like that, you can really apply those skills. Now, it might be a bit trickier than usual to make a transition just because there's a lot of candidates applying for jobs. But I do think it's absolutely possible as long as the role is really similar to your past experience. What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just going to touch on that too. I mean, it's important to take your qualities, your important, where you've developed the most development in your qualities in that role that you're in, and utilizing that into the office position. So you mentioned some of those areas, Maria. So I think that, that would be the easiest way is focus on what you've developed and those skills and utilizing that moving into the office position.
Yeah.
So I have one more question, actually. I have made some connections with a few firms through networking. One or two firms were interested, but one of them in particular informed me that they will not be hiring until next year because they just set up their office in Toronto. How to keep up with the partners and keep the conversation going?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question because I've noticed recently firms change their mind a lot because the processes that happen around them really influence their decision. So it's really good for firms to have a long-term plan of how they're going to grow their office, but more often than not, they actually don't end up sticking to it just because life happens and you have to react to what's going on right away. So I would say keep following up with them because the more you follow up with them, the more they remember you. And likely, if they're just opening up an office, they will probably be hiring a lot of people shortly just because they will want to grow the office at some point. And you want to be the first person they think of when they do that. So that's why I would say just following up with them is always a good idea.
Absolutely. And that's the key word right there is just follow up. You want to make sure that you're staying, in the radar, and you are making sure that you continue that follow up conversation and just to check in and see where they're at. Any tips on reaching out to hiring managers directly on LinkedIn?
That's an interesting question. I would say presenting yourself with a really nice introduction is always good. So it really depends if you know the hiring manager. So if you had an interview with them, it's really easy because then you can just follow up on the interview and underline your motivation for the role. If you don't know the hiring manager, I would just introduce myself and I would say, I'm really interested in your firm. So definitely let me know if there might be any opportunities for me in the future at your firm or something along those lines. Like, what would you say, Lisa? What would you advise?
No, I think you nailed it right on the head, actually, Maria. I think you've touched on most of those points. So that's great. So going back to the previous question, it's a continuation here. It says, that's the question, how to keep in touch with them. How should the follow-up be without annoying them? Okay, so fair enough. Absolutely. I understand that because you don't want to keep hounding them. It's about just checking in. It could even, where their status is, or, just asking them, even in the first follow-up email. It could even be something, when they're looking at possibly starting the hire or when they're starting to move, or and then keeping a follow-up tab on that and continuing your follow-up that way. Do you want to touch on that too, Maria? Or
Yeah, I would say that's exactly right. And it's really important not to bother them too much. Of course, you don't want to be overwhelming. But on the other hand, it's nice to just say thank you for your time and just checking with them regularly. So the timing is really critical. It really depends on what situation you're in. If you already have the interview or you're just interested in the firm and you want to apply for any roles they might have available. But in any case, you want to space it out a bit so that it's not too overwhelming, right?
Absolutely. And we actually had someone just comment on that, say maybe start with asking how the office setup is progressing. I think that's great, and that's just it. So when you're doing the follow-ups, you just want to, ask certain questions to keep them engaged, and just always finish it off with a follow-up as far as when would be a good time to connect with them again, and trying to get that information as well.
Absolutely.
Perfect. And we've got some thank yous here. So everyone, you're welcome.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm just noticing because I also have this tab open questions here underneath. I actually can't see the chat for some reason, but I can see the questions. So I think we went through all of those, right, Lisa? Do you see anything that we didn't go through?
No, I think we've answered those. I'm just kind of going through them as well. Yeah, no, I think we did.
What are
Yeah, we.
I just saw this question from Deanna. What are some things to focus on or positive things to do, say, in an interview when you're trying to transition into another field where your skills are transferable, but employers are hesitant to consider you due to your previous work content experience? So this is similar to the question we answered a minute ago. But yeah, it's important that you always underline your skills. So it's really about going back to the job description. So even if you haven't done everything in the job description, you want to underline your experience that fits with all of the points that you can. So even if it's not software experience, maybe you don't have the right software experience for the role. Maybe you have a lot of experience working with people in a front office role. So that would be really key if you're going, let's say, for a receptionist role or a junior LEA role where you're working directly with clients all the time. So really underlying all your personal skills is essential, and also giving examples from your past work experience. So even if you haven't done these tasks, you may have done something similar in your past experience. So really coming up with good examples and those examples, how they fit with the job description is really the way to go. That way, employers are way more willing to consider you for a role that you might not have experience in.
Okay. So we also have here, in the interest of staying flexible with respect to a salary range, I have tried asking the firms to provide me with the salary range that they are comfortable with. I have noticed that some firms are not comfortable with providing a salary range. My concern is that providing them with a salary range based on my skills and qualifications may seem presumptuous on my part. So fair enough, and I can respect that completely. But it's important to provide that information, because bottom line is that you need to make a living as well, and you need to be comfortable with what is presented. So I think having that salary range is got to be realistic and comfortable for you. So I think that part is very important, that stays real and honest on your end.
Yeah, I've also noticed that when employers don't provide the range, it can be for two reasons. One is they want to keep it confidential, fair enough. But the second one could also be that they're actually quite flexible based on the candidate's experience, which is the perfect situation to be in. So if you get that question in that case, why not just say what you expect? Because then the firm can be flexible around you if they really like you. So that's usually a good thing. Another thing, because I know this question is usually really tricky for people, they don't know quite how to answer it. Some people find it awkward being asked about salary. So what do? I would say if you just don't feel comfortable talking about it, you can just underline your motivation for the role. You can say, I would, be happy to consider any offer that you would give me because I'm really interested in the firm. So I would love to continue further the recruitment process. That way you really show your motivation, and then you kind of escape from the awkward question.
Awesome. So I am a senior law clerk with 10 plus years experience and understand the need to be flexible with salary in this post-pandemic job market. But how flexible should you be without undervaluing yourself? Should you consider up to 10%, 20%, 30% decrease in salary?
Yeah, it's not about going down on salary. It's about an exchange for that. Like you need to balance your expectations. So if you're going backwards in salary, it has to be for the role, or maybe it's related to the circumstances you're in. You just have to make a decision to start a role really quickly. So I would say really think about where you stand in terms of that. So what are you gaining by giving some of your salary backwards? Because you also don't want to end up in the situation of looking for 3 months for a role just because you don't want to go backwards in salary, because maybe nobody is able to pay that now on the market since the market has shifted after the pandemic. So it's a tricky question to think about, but always think of it in a positive way as well, not just giving up your salary and devaluing yourself. It's also about what are you gaining. Are you gaining maybe new experience in a new area of law? Are you now working in a bigger firm unlike before, so you'll get exposed to more interesting complex tasks? So really think about this as well, because there always has to be a trade-off. Like, what would you say, Lisa? What's your opinion on?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And it's about thinking of the positive. So what the long-term effects are. So yeah, I appreciate the fact that, you might be taking a little bit of a salary decrease due to the pandemic, but what in turn, what are you gaining? And same points that, Maria, you kind of hit on the head already, but, the size of the firm, the job itself, room for growth opportunity. There's other things that are coming into play with it. So we have to look at it broader and open that circle up a little bit.
Absolutely. And unlike before, you really have to be a bit more flexible now, looking for positions. Really, the market has shifted a bit. So you should never just directly turn down a role because the salary is lower than your previous salary, because that will make you, not a competitive candidate. If you're looking for a job faster, you want to have as many opportunities as possible so that you get to the point of being able to choose from them, rather than just having one opportunity and that's it. So the more options you have, the more flexible you are, the better chances you get in the end of getting the right role.
Sounds good. So we want to just take the opportunity to thank everybody for being here today. I hope that we were able to give you guys some insights and some great tips. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We would love to help you. And we just want to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciated you joining our webinar today. So hopefully it was helpful. And just to follow up on what Lisa said, you will be receiving a recording of it as well. So you can always consult with it, go back to any points you might be interested in. And if you have any additional questions, always feel free to reach out to us, as she said.
Yep, sounds good. And I'm seeing all the thank yous. You guys are all very welcome. And I hope everyone has a great Canada Day tomorrow. And we will hope to see you guys soon, okay? Enjoy your day, everyone.
Enjoy your day.
Bye.
Bye.